Hope we get a few more people in the room here. We don't have quorum yet.
They've got 2 whole minutes. Oh, we've got quorum now. Good afternoon, Clifford.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Hi, Cliff. Hi, Councillor DeAndrade.
Hi, how are you?
Does anyone know if Mayor Beamish is joining us today?
I believe he's planning on. I saw him earlier. He didn't say he wasn't.
And there's Councillor Lumley. Okay, well, hopefully he'll join us. My clock says that it's 3 o'clock now, so I'd like to call this Planning and Development Committee meeting to order. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda, please? Councillor DeAndrade, all in favor?
Easy.
Councillor Lumley. Okay, great. Before we move into reports, can I get a motion to receive all the reports on the agenda today? Councillor Crowell, Councillor DeAndrade, all in favor? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, the first report we have on our agenda today is from our planner, Katie Thomas, on the development permit for form and character for 20 townhouses at 741 Hillcrest Road. And I'll remind everyone that we reviewed this proposal at our last meeting, and the developer has now come back with a revised plan for us to take a look at. So over to you, Katie.
Thank you very much, Chair Ladwick. I'm going to share my screen. I've got a quick presentation here for you. Okay, so the PDC were presented with the DP application for 741 Hillcrest Road last month, and the applicant was directed to revise the plans with some reduced massing. So during the discussion, there was also a request to bring forward some renderings of the proposal, and therefore this staff report provides 2 options. It has the original proposal that has a rendering, and also a new proposal which breaks up the building. The development is proposed to create 20 townhouses on a currently vacant parcel on Hillcrest Road. The property is zoned RM2, and the zoning allows for approximately 22 townhouses. So the OCP designation is medium density residential. You can see 741 here is outlined in blue. The surrounding area is also medium density. The intent of this designation is for townhouses, stacked townhouses, and 2 to 4 story apartments. So both of the options that were put forward do conform with the development permit area number 4, which is for multifamily land uses. So both options break the development into essentially 3 benches. So you have your first bench, which would have 6 units on Hillcrest. You've then got your middle bench, which would have a total of 8 units, and then your rear, which has 6 units, and then there's a private amenity space for residents of the complex in the middle. As you can see, the grade from Hillcrest goes down towards the rear of the building, so towards the rear of the lot. So this last bench is about 4 meters lower than the first bench. So here we have option 1 to your left and option 2 to your right. As you can see, option 2 looks to break up the massing of the building by bringing the lane to the middle. It breaks each of the buildings in 2, so then you have a total of 6 buildings rather than option 1, which has just the 3 buildings. There is a pedestrian right-of-way which is the same in both options, and this is along this east property line, and that connects to the south property down here, which is 728 Gibsons Way. As you can see with option 2, the buildings were pushed out towards the east and west setbacks to provide for the drive aisle and to provide for a segregated pedestrian walkway that is buffered by some landscaping. This would mean that option 2 would need a variance for the side setbacks. So I'm going to show you option 1 here. This is the rendering of the proposal that you saw last month. As you can see, we've got the one building at the front, and then your buildings are at the, got 2 further banks of buildings at the rear. This is the pedestrian right-of-way, which would go down to Gibsons Way and your drive aisle. This is option 2, again from Hillcrest. This is with the massing broken up. You can see you've got your drive aisle in the middle. You've got 3 units on either side of the drive aisle. Both options, the form and character remains the same. The building heights should remain the same as well. So the recommendations, we've got 2 options laid out for you to consider. Option 1 would be that the PDC choose option 1 and the building permit would be authorized essentially immediately and the applicant could proceed to a building permit. Option 2 would be that the PDC choose option 2 to move forward, and then that would mean that we would need to start a variance process. So we would notify residents in accordance with the town's development application procedures bylaw, and then we would bring a new report back to council to evaluate the variance application and gain comments from the neighbours before asking council to consider both the variance application and the development permit. So I know that Zerben is in the audience if you have any questions, but I will close this screen right now.
Okay, thanks, Katie. Oh, hello, Mayor Beamish. Thanks for joining us.
Sorry, I was just finished another Zoom call.
Okay. Okay, so shall we open up this discussion on the form and character of the 2 options? How are people feeling about them? Silent room today.
I can start.
Sure, Councillor DeAndrade.
Thank you, Chair Ludwig. I think to me, yeah, the looks are way better. The front, the massing has been highly reduced. I think my concern now is with the setbacks, because correct me if I'm wrong, the reason for setbacks is to avoid the developers encroach in the property of the neighbors. And that's my concern right now. It's 1.5 meters for a building of 8.5 meters or 10.5, and height 10.5, sorry, 9.6 and 9.7. It's a lot of, you know, and I understand there's a possibility for to get feedback from neighbors, but I feel hesitant because if we approve this development, any other proponent around the area will feel the same, right? So that's my concern right now. So I like option 2, but I don't like the fact that we are reducing the setbacks.
Okay, Katie, did you want to comment?
Yeah, so the variance would be to reduce the setbacks from 4.5 meters to 3 meters on either side.
Okay, Mayor Beamish.
Katie, could I just get you to remind us of what the purpose of a setback is?
A setback is essentially each zone would have a setback. It's not necessarily to impede on other people's space, but it's a feeling of I guess, fire separation is one issue. So usually it's a 1.5 minimum setback for any openings, and I'm sure the director of planning can come up with some other reasons too.
Thank you, Katie. I think Katie answered that well. I mean, typically it's fire separations. They can always be dealt with alternate solutions as well, or non-combustible siding. And it is to maintain the form and character of an area.
Yeah.
So typically single families are closer, have smaller setbacks like 1.5 meters, whereas multifamily has a bit more wider setbacks in situations like this, but in really urban areas, they may have smaller setbacks and could be closer to each other. But typically it's fire separations.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Beamish?
Yeah, I'm looking at page 6 of 8 of the report, or 10 of 444 of the agenda package, which does show kind of a bird's eye view of the development. Which areas are we talking about the setback being hit? Is it on the north or south side, or the east-west sides?
You'd be looking at the east-west side, and primarily for the first bench of the building, so building 1 and 2. If you have a look at on the east side, actually building 2, 4, and 6 are right up against the 3-meter right of way. On the west side, it's just the building 1. There's an electrical closet that would need to go into that setback for that and have that 3-meter setback.
But there does appear to be quite a bit of space between the buildings and the neighboring properties. Besides what the setback would be, I see trees in there, and it looks like a walkway, pedestrian passageway, and things like that.
Yes, on the west side, there's a panhandle to a property at the rear. So 747 Hillcrest has a driveway down that west property line.
Right.
729 has a 1.5 meter setback as it's a single family dwelling.
Right. Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Crowell?
This is sort of a hypothetical question probably to the developer. Currently, if the setbacks are reduced, it has to go to for a variance and a lot of sort of other sort of procedures involved. Is the project viable with 17 units, which would eliminate the necessity for setbacks, period? Because it would reduce the footprint of the buildings on the property. In which case you'd be able to reduce by 3 units and proceed with basically the approval of option 2.
We can certainly ask the developer that. I believe he is in the meeting. I would also propose to ask the question about whether or not it would not be possible just to reduce the unit sizes by a foot each, to just shrink them up a bit and therefore maintain the number of units, but not have to go through a variance application, which, as we all know in our community, can be challenging. Mr. Billamora, am I saying that correctly? Would you like to comment on that?
Yes, hi. Good afternoon, Mayor and members of the council. So reducing the number of units is not something the developers would definitely like, because it does impede upon what their calculations are right now. It would affect it. I'd like to just reiterate another point also, that the western setback is higher than 3 meters. It's just the electrical room, which is on the main floor, just an electrical closet, not even a room, that actually comes up to the 3 meters. And on the eastern property line, so what we've tried to do is we've reduced any openings along on the face of the building, which is on the eastern side, so that we do not impede any neighbors, by looking into their yards or any of that. At the same time, it also helps us in fire separation. So is going to be just a dead wall, more or less, with just maybe one or two small openings. So we are trying to reduce that. So I think that would help some of the concerns that council has raised.
Okay, thank you for that. Can you tell us if it's just the electrical closet that is extending to on the west side? How far back does the building sit back?
No, but how far back is it? 3 feet. So 3 feet encroachment. Around, yeah. So it's just the electrical closet that is butting up on the west side. If we take it to the building face, we would get an additional meter over there. So it would be around 4 meters to the building face from the property line, approximately.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. Does anyone, oh, Mayor Beamish?
I understand the fire department has looked at this and has not expressed any concern about the development as proposed, so they would have looked at the setbacks.
Yeah, I have to say, if I was a neighbor, I would like the fact that the traffic of the development was running down the middle of the development rather than against my property line. Personally, I would prefer that for what that's worth. Does anyone else have any thoughts on the two options? Okay, sorry, can I, one more thing. Mr. Billam, is it Billamoria?
Yes, that's correct, Councillor. It's Mr. Billamoria. Yeah.
Thank you. I know you didn't address my question about the possibility of reducing the unit sizes by a foot just to avoid the variance. And the reason I say that, I'm saying that just as much for your sake as I am for council's sake, just because the variance process.
So I do understand that problem, Councillor, but the problem that would create is that by reducing even a few inches, we would actually reduce the size of the parkings that is available within the garages on the main level. And that is a part of the zoning bylaw, so we would not be able to reduce that. That's the issue that we would face. So it would be very difficult for us to even take a few inches off from each of the units. They are designed just to have enough space just for the two parallel car parks next to each other and meet the zoning bylaws, basically.
Right, okay, thank you. Councillor Lumley.
I think, well, clearly the second one's the best alternative. And if we're talking about 1.5 meters and the fire department seems okay with it, I think we're just like microman, like we're, you know, I think to ask him to reduce the size of the units, I don't know if that's fair. You'll just have to go through the variance process. I mean, developers do, that's what they do. So I actually like it way better. Like I'd say the option B was considerably better. And as much as you don't like people driving by your property line, now they're outdoor spaces within their own units as well. So it creates like a little bit of a community in there. And when I looked at this, I thought, you know, it's like 100% improvement from the original. So I'd be willing to support it, the option 2.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I looked at it. When we looked at this option, or the option 1 at our last meeting, I could have gone either way. And then I opened up this report today and I was like, oh, I'm so glad people pushed to make some adjustments because I think it looks significantly better myself. Councillor Lumley?
I know you look at the drawings. I would like to hear like maybe from Scott and Clifford regarding the textures and the finishings on the outside. Of course, my biggest fear is with some of these projects is that we're just going to be looking at these massive vinyl sided buildings. I'm just not sure if, you know, like over time, you know, they just, you know, the aesthetics of them just doesn't last. And I'm just not sure what I know we like the materials and stuff. I don't know if they have any thoughts on how to make it, the project, you know, maybe look nice for a longer period of time.
It's not vinyl sided, is it? No one builds with vinyl anymore, do they?
It's meant to be hardy plank.
People do vinyl.
Clifford and Scott? Clifford?
Sure, I don't mind going ahead first. I guess I'd begin with saying that, yeah, I think this new design really addresses the comments we had last time. I definitely strongly prefer it. I think as far as the materials go, I know the last time we talked about it, I certainly was concerned about the monolithic appearance of just sort of the gray hardy board, but I think breaking it into buildings really softens that and alleviates my concern with it. I think the cementitious cladding board, I mean, you know, it'd be nice to see people build out of brick, I suppose, but that's probably not cost effective enough for this project. I imagine the architect has probably looked at adding stone or whatever materials he can, and this is probably the budget compromise. The cement board looks good. I mean, it's got easy 20, 25-year lifespan without very much maintenance. It can be pressure washed, repainted very easily. You know, you kind of see it everywhere. It's kind of, at this point, very West Coast design, I would even say. I'm okay with it. I like the attempts to soften it with the wood. The rails, I think, look nice, and the little porches. I think, you know, I think the details help. Anyway, that's where I'm at with it. I think the response to our previous comments on this has been well addressed, and I would support this moving forward.
Thanks, Cliff. Scott?
Thanks. Hello, everyone. Council only. Yeah, I think it's a good point. You know, this is sort of the nature of the beast of these kinds of developments, is that if you want this kind of density, you're going to get buildings that sort of look like this. I mean, for me personally, I don't love the look of these buildings. My own designs are more like West Coast modern, I would say. So I do like large overhangs, but less sort of detailing that you have here. I always think an easy fix is just to add more wood to these kinds of things. So, you know, wood siding would be lovely. It's a lot harder to maintain. And when it's a stratified building like this, it's so difficult to get that kind of thing, you know, maintained. So those buildings tend to wear out more too, because people don't want to pay to maintain them. So unfortunately, you know, we're left with buildings that are really hardy, no pun intended, for that reason, that the maintenance is easy. You know, and in terms of the color palette, you know, it's just a product of its time. I mean, maybe those colors are trendy now and they're going to go out of fashion in a decade, but then they'll come into fashion 20 years later, you know. So, you know, I wouldn't put orange on a building like that. At first I was excited because I thought that orange on the top was wood itself, but it's just an orange paint. So buildings can be repainted. So I think it's sort of, yeah, in a way it sort of is what it is. I mean, you know, I think there's probably too many colors on it. Oh, I'm just looking at the kind of aerial rendering right now, and I can see blue, orange, gray. And again, it's one of those techniques used to sort of break up the mass of it. But I think the form is sort of already doing that. And I don't know, maybe there would be different ways to highlight the different masses. I mean, imagine if every building was a totally different color. You know, that would be something totally interesting, right? Maybe not as good in terms of a cohesive design, but you know, but overall, I think this is kind of this sort of par for the course, and I think you could do a lot worse. So.
Thanks. Yeah, I wondered about the blue siding too when I saw it. Wondered if, but it's so hard to say in just renderings like this, whether it's just standing out because of the rendering or how it'll look in situ. So, okay, thank you for that, Scott. Any other comments? I'm not hearing any significant opposition unless people want to make some recommendations about finishes. Going once, going twice. Okay, so we've got a recommendation before us. I'm hearing more support for option 2 than option 1. So does the PDC want to recommend moving forward with option 2? Okay, so I'll read it out. The PDC recommends moving forward with option 2 for development permit DP 2020-10 for 741 Hillcrest Road, and we direct staff to notify neighbors of the requested variance to reduce the side setbacks from 4.5 meters to 3 meters. Someone want to move that? Councillor Crowell, someone want to second it? Councillor Lumley, all in favor? Councillor DeAndrade, do you want to? Okay, so we'll note that Councillor DeAndrade is opposed. Okay, that passes. All right, moving on to the next report in our agenda. It's from our planner, Kirsten Rockins, regarding the form and character development permit, DP 2020-13 application for building improvements at 1036 Seamount Way. Over to you, Kirsten.
Great, thank you, Chair. I'll just share my screen. Yeah, this report addresses the form and character development permit application for 1036 Seamount Way. The application is for a proposed 283 square meter or 3,000 square foot addition and renovation to an existing building on the site. Sorry, there we go, shown here, which is located behind the Haley Dodge dealership on Seamount Way. The owner of the building is looking to grow the space to accommodate new machinery for its stone cutting and polishing business and to improve the outward appearance of the building and improve the brand of the business. The development requires a development permit for the form and character of the building and landscape under development permit area number 6 for light industrial development. And we're fortunate to have the project architect, Joe Oteruelo, with us today to present the development plans. We also have the owner of the property and the business, Bob Lee, available to answer any questions that the committee might have. And before I turn the screen over to Joe, though, I'll just give a quick summary of our staff review. And in summary, all requirements of the zoning bylaw are met within the plans as presented. The application was referred to the fire department, building department, infrastructure services, and public works for comment. Comments have now, since publication of the report, all been received, and no concerns are reported by any of the departments. Required frontage works, fire safety equipment, and servicing upgrades are noted and will be addressed at the time of the building permit review. A detailed evaluation based on the form and character guidelines is provided in the report. And in conclusion, staff finds that the proposed work provides a significant improvement to the site and that the plan substantially addressed the DPA guidelines. Thus, staff recommends issuance of the development permit as outlined on page 1 of the report. In this meeting, we're looking for a recommendation from the PDC to council on whether to approve the form and character DP for the project as proposed, and a resolution to approve the proposal as presented is provided. Alternatively, the PDC may recommend that the proposal be approved subject to conditions or that it be denied if there's a good reason to do that. So thank you, and I'll turn the floor over to Joe, and then following the committee can discuss and ask any questions they might have.
Okay, thanks, Kirsten. So we're turning it over to Joe now. Is there more of a report that we're going to see, or any more images, or?
Hello, thank you,
Joe
Christy.
Sorry, go Joe.
Can you hear me now? Sorry, I was muted.
Yes, we can hear you, Joe.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Yeah, I don't have too much to add. Kristen explained very well our intentions. I think functionally, the biggest advantage of this building addition is to have an interior loading bay. Right now, it's totally exposed. And as we all know, it rains sometimes in this town. So that was important from a functional perspective. Aesthetically, as Kristen said, the brand for the building, because the product is sleek, contemporary countertops, not classic or vintage kitchen accessories. The idea is to go for more of a commercial image than industrial, to offset that industrial hangar look. That's why we've opted for a glass curtain wall with horizontal stripes of different tones, translucent. Some timber elements, including the planters and the rooftop pergola, and quite a bit of greenery, because we have a balcony over the loading bay entrance and the main entrance that serves as coverage. The balcony itself is more decorative, but it would be laden with green elements. So that's basically all the other items I think are specified in the project. as far as 2-hour fire resistant walls on the 2 east and west property lines, lot coverage, parking requirements. Anyway, I hope you like it, and please, if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Joe. All right, so do you want to open this one up for discussion? Mayor Beamish.
I just congratulate the owner planner for an excellent addition to the improvement to the industrial park and setting a new standard for the appearance up there. It's not a tent. Draw your attention to that, and we want to get away from tents, obviously. No, I think it's a great thing. I'm by that area all of the time. And Joe, you also have an area further down where you store some of your stone. Are you planning on doing anything on that side in the future?
That's pending, but there are definite plans.
Okay, good.
I don't know the details though.
Well, it's a great standard you're showing for this building in the industrial site, and I congratulate you. And I'm very comfortable with the proposal, and I would move the recommendation and be approved.
Thank you.
Councillor Lundley?
I'd have to agree with the mayor, and I think it's exciting for a little town for somebody to be expanding their business and not moving out of town, but being able to expand within the town. Plus, he's going to generate jobs for other people because someone's going to have to clean all those windows. So there'll be a trickle down from the expansion. So yeah, I'm with the mayor for sure.
Others? Councillor D'Andretti?
Yeah, I mirror the mayor's and Councillor Lumley comment. I really like the design. I have one concern regarding the impact of light spill, glare or sky glow. Since obviously there are no nocturnal birds, but also we are under the Pacific Flyway, which is a big migratory route. I acknowledge that the owner said that the lights will have minimal impact on terms of light spill, but I'm trying to understand how the town will measure what minimal impact is, right? And just if I can,
the number of people that complained. No.
Well, because the thing is, this is specific not to impact bird migration, right? Or the activity of owls and other birds, perhaps even bats. And just a reminder that one of Council's strategic plan commitment is to consider the environmental impact of all decisions. So while I fully support this project, I would like just that this impact, because what the owner will perceive, that he may perceive as a low impact, but technically it's not for the birds. So I just want to understand how the town measures the minimal. Is there a scale? Is there something that the town can use to understand if whatever is the glare, it's really minimal, or opinion of an expert?
Kirsten or the director?
Yeah, I can, you're welcome to add, Leslie Ann, but yeah, in the guidelines, there are there's no measurement or threshold. The guideline, and it's a guideline, not a requirement, it doesn't show up in our zoning bylaw, is for full cutoff so that the light isn't projected upward at all. And so in this case, it has to be a judgment call unless we develop some threshold to operate by.
I have to admit, I wasn't thinking about light so much, but birds did cross my mind. The reason I say this is because I just had a bird fly into my window yesterday and die on my front porch. And so it did occur to me that there's a lot of glass there. And I do wonder, Joe, maybe while we've got you, is there anything on there to deflect that from occurring? Because you're putting all this greenery around a bunch of glass. I don't know. It'd be a lot of bird impacts. I mean, it screamed out to me for that when I saw it. So is there any, like there's deflector, there's things that people put on glass to reduce that. Has that been considered at all?
Yes, provisions could be made, especially along the perimeter of the crown of the building and on the balcony railing, to put basically it's moving glitter that creates a distraction for the birds and catches their attention. We could look into such measures for this building, because I understand, yeah, because it's quite a large pane of glass.
Mhm. Yeah, I would certainly appreciate if
Mhm.
considerations to bird impacts could be thought of and incorporated into the design for bird impacts. Councillor D'Andrade.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that too. Perhaps the developer already knows that, but there's some decals that you can put on the glass, and it's quite invisible, but it's visible for the birds.
Okay, so unless I hear any other comments, seems like people are supportive of the project. I too think it's great, and I like seeing, I'm really happy to see this business thriving and staying here in Gibsons. I think it's excellent. We do have a recommendation. Maybe we'll amend it slightly just to include some bird deflector considerations. But the recommendation right now is that the Planning and Development Committee recommends approval of the development permit for the form and character of the proposed building expansion at 1036 Seamount Way, DP 2020-13, subject to receipt of the landscape cost estimate and incorporation of bird deflector. I'm looking for words here.
Measures.
Say it again.
Measures.
Measures, thank you. Bird deflector measures.
And if it's possible, the verification of the light glare, right? To ensure that is minimal, right? Because there are some parameters the town of Gibson doesn't have, but for example, the city of Vancouver, I believe they do have. They have a very good bird policy. So that would be really helpful, even if you don't have the policy, but that would help to support, the commitments of council to protect wildlife.
Should that be a second motion though? Because it's kind of a separate, almost policy piece, is it not? Because right now we don't have any way of measuring light spill.
Mm-hmm.
So how can we do that for this project?
I think the same way, if I may say, the same way we are asking the proponent to add some anti-glare that birds can see, if they could also verify that what he considers minimal impact for the light, it is actually minimal, right? Because what is for us, it might not necessary for the birds. And
Yeah.
at this point, it's just a request that he considers that, because we don't have a policy to enforce.
Right, okay. CAO?
There's a rating for outdoor lighting called dark sky friendly, and it's pretty much everything you buy now. I believe it's already in our OCP for us to do that, and there was a discussion about that a few years ago here on the coast. So that's the standard we're looking for on those lights. It's dark sky friendly.
Okay, so with that, with the new information from the CAO, are we happy to keep the recommendation as I previously stated? Okay, I'm not seeing it. Okay, Councillor Crowell moved it. Does anyone else want to second it?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mayor Beamish. Okay, and all in favor? Okay, great, thank you. Congratulations, guys. Another exciting project in Gibsons. Okay, moving on to report number 3. This is going to be presented by the Director of Planning, and it's on the Sunshine Coast Housing Needs Assessment Report. So over to you, Director of Planning.
Thank you, Councillor Ladwig. So I've actually got Matt Thompson with Urban Matters here. He's got a presentation, and I'll pass the floor over to him, and he'll share his screen and present this report.
Great. Thank you. Hello, Matt. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Just let me know if you can all see the PowerPoint.
We can see.
1 minute, please.
Okay. Thanks very much for your time today, members of the committee. As I think many folks know, over the last number of months, I think about 9 months, Urban Matters has been working with a number of regional partners led by the town of Gibsons, but with the Sunshine Coast Regional District and District of Sechelt on completing a regional housing needs assessment. The purpose of the housing needs assessment is functionally to support the planning and growth initiatives of communities across BC. It recently, about 2 years ago, the provincial government passed legislation requiring all municipalities and regional districts to complete housing needs assessments by early 2022. These reports are really intended to inform official community plans, housing policies, and the development of new affordable housing options in communities, economic development, and broader planning initiatives such as zoning bylaws and regional growth. As noted below, these reports are also intended to help inform and support new housing initiatives, typically ones that are led by nonprofits, by demonstrating the need in given communities for funding or supports. Their requirement for CMHC's seed funding package and some form of statement of need is typically required in any BC housing application that is made. So these reports are intended not just to support local government action, but also action from other partners in the housing sector on supporting new and varied housing in our communities. The reports themselves have essentially two major components. One is the data that's required to be collected, which is over 50 different indicators that are, many of which are provided through a customs data package from the provincial government, and then data that's required to be reported on. So in order to be flexible for smaller versus large communities, the province is only required that about 20% of the data that local governments collect needs to be reported on, including indicators such as core housing need and statements of key need within communities. There's also a summary form that's completed as part of the project. Under the legislation, housing needs reports must be delivered every 5 years. The first one for the Sunshine Coast is being prepared this year in 2021. This information is based on the 2016 census. Typically, when the census is conducted, it takes about 1 to 2 years for all the data to be compiled by Statistics Canada and then released. So we would anticipate from the 2021 census that we would start to see new information in 2023, and would anticipate another package being collected by the provincial government, because there is a lot of information that they were able to collect that's not publicly available through community profiles on the Statistics Canada website, and therefore requires a custom data request, which the province does on behalf of the local governments. So in terms of the results, we're really hoping that this increases and strengthens our understanding of specific groups in need, such as seniors, families, single parents. It increases our understanding of housing supply and demand within these communities. Really increases our understanding of the affordability pressures that households are increasingly facing on the Sunshine Coast, and identifies some possible future needs, including what quantity and what form of housing. So it's not intended to be a policy document. It really aims to identify the who needs housing and what housing may be needed, but it doesn't speak to how local government can support the development of new housing. So the report itself uses the housing continuum as a lens through which to view housing. This continuum, or this wheelhouse, has been, the circular one was developed by the city of Kelowna several years ago as part of their own housing needs assessment, and is intended to show that housing isn't necessarily actually kind of a linear thing that we move through, but that at any point in our life we may need various forms of housing, whether it be rental or ownership or subsidized or emergency shelter or long-term supportive housing. That any community that can be considered livable will have a diversity of different housing types. So a little bit of background about the project. We launched the project in January of this year, so we're about 9 months in. Through the spring or late winter and spring, we collected data and conducted kind of a quantitative analysis. Phase 3 took place from April to July, where we were doing engagement. Now, this was intended to be in-person engagement. Due to COVID, we did take the large bulk of engagement online with good success too. A varied and diverse group of stakeholders were engaged throughout the process, ranging from individuals with lived experience of housing vulnerability all the way through to those delivering housing and members of kind of local government, the development sector, the nonprofits, and our own planning commissions around the coast. We are now in phase 4. We're a little bit behind our original schedule, but we are now delivering the housing needs report fairly on time, given what we went through kind of in the late spring and early summer. With a final remaining component to the project, once these housing needs reports have been received by local governments, we are undertaking a follow-up, which is going to be a policy document that looks at best practices that address certain needs, tailored to the 3 local governments that are partners on the project. And so that will be coming forward to local governments probably in December or January. But I said earlier that this report does not address the how. That report is intended to address the how and give some ideas for opportunities for action to local governments, to councils and staff. So just to move quickly through the key findings. Overall, we focused our findings for this presentation on the town of Gibsons. The report does a good job of laying them out, and every jurisdiction on the coast will get its own kind of short form housing at a glance infographic document. So we'll have one for Gibsons, one for Sechelt, and one for all of the electoral areas in the regional district. But to quickly summarize kind of some of the key themes emerging for Gibsons, we see strong growth in the community between 2006 and 2016. And while that number is slightly dated, it's a few years old, the estimated population for 2020 kind of builds on those historical trends and is fast approaching 5,000, which I know is a planning concern for other reasons, but is a major milestone for a community of our size. We're seeing, not surprisingly, an aging trend across the Sunshine Coast, with small increases in our younger population and larger increases in our older population. This is somewhat mitigated in our municipalities, where we do see a little bit more growth of younger residents, as opposed to some of the rural areas, which are experiencing kind of a more of the aging trend. But as a whole, our community is certainly an older one, and that points to a need for planning for aging in place and housing for seniors. Building on that, our projections show, and again, our projections are based on historical trends, but they do show that by 2025, the largest household growth will be in non-family households, which is consistent with an aging population or seniors living alone, that may be more single-person households. That said, through the community engagement, we did also hear that Gibsons and Sechelt in particular are experiencing an influx of younger families who are moving over from Metro Vancouver, in particular because they're leaving the more expensive Metro region and coming to a community where, in comparison, certainly housing is much more affordable and less expensive. And so, the projections don't necessarily integrate some of those demographic changes, but they do still show more anticipated growth in the rural areas in younger families and younger people in the community. Generally, our household income is lower in Gibsons than across the rest of the Sunshine Coast or many other areas. And however, the median income has steadily increased between 2006 and 2016. Median income for renters is always significantly lower. Renter households tend to lean towards more single income households, and also households who are in the service, tourism sectors of the economy, and so may not be able to command as much in terms of wages and salary. And so the median income for renters in Gibsons was a little over half of the median income for owners. And that points to more issues with affordability and housing vulnerability, depending on their own circumstances. Overall, we've got over 2,300 dwellings in the community. Most of these, a little over half, are single-family homes. Another large proportion of these are duplexes or homes within a secondary suite, and movable dwellings represent 1%. We want to reflect on the fact that some of our denser forms of housing may not be reflected in the data. They do show up in the report where we looked at building permits. And so that data, there's an attempt to kind of bring that data up to date. And you can see the bottom point there, between 2015 and 19, nearly 200 building permits were issued, of which 10% were multifamily, and 8% were two-family dwellings. So a trend leaning towards additional multifamily within the community. Ownership and affordability of ownership remains a major challenge within the community. Those households that have been able to purchase historically won't be experiencing this. Our analysis is really tending towards median earning households that are looking to buy into the market now. And so any median earning household across all the types that we look at, couples without children, couples with children, lone parents, and non-family households, would not be able to purchase a home in the market as it stands today, particularly of the single detached home variety, which is the large majority of our stock. This does point to whether an oversupply or a need to look towards more multifamily, because that type of housing is generally more affordable. And particularly if we're looking at kind of younger households and seniors who may be looking to downsize as they age, a diversity of housing stock that provides accessible options and less required maintenance can be good for both those first-time homeowners and those owners who are looking to downsize. Overall, non-census families and lone parent families are the least likely to be able to afford ownership, and probably, if they do own, may be experiencing more affordability pressures. And so this just shows us what the cost of ownership for a single detached home is as compared to a townhouse or apartment. And you can see the big difference. Both of those multifamily types become quite a bit more affordable for those couple households that may be looking at ownership and are median earning. When we move to rental, there are a number of considerable gaps for housing, and there are also a number of data gaps that need to be noted. CMHC information on rental housing for Gibsons is quite limited. In fact, I don't think we have any. I think it was only available for Seashelt. And so we did conduct a brief kind of environmental scan of current listings in the market to better understand what the cost of renting is now. But I think the final bullet on this slide really summarizes the key point, which is that nearly a third of renter households in Gibsons are in core housing need. And core housing need means that you are either paying more than 30% of your income towards your shelter costs, or you're living in housing that doesn't meet standards for crowding, or that you're in housing that doesn't meet basic sort of maintenance requirements, may not be properly serviced, or may have issues around insulation or leaks or mold. And so if you are experiencing any one or all of those issues and you're unable to afford an alternative in your local market, you would be considered in core housing need. 16% of renters were in extreme core housing need, which means they paid 50% or more of their pre-tax income towards housing costs. So that's a not inconsiderable number of the households within our community who are experiencing that really significant crunch. And as a stakeholder in another project put it, when we set these standards of affordability, it was not intended to be a bare minimum. It was really supposed to highlight those members of the community that need different housing alternatives that are affordable. And so this, again, kind of summarizing the gap, lone parent families and non-census families who may be most likely to rent are also still least likely to be able to afford it. Even in a kind of secondary suite or apartment context. Add to that, really low vacancy rates that we hear about anecdotally and through engagements across the coast, and low availability of purpose-built rental, as well as other pressures on the rental market. And I think there's been especially in the last 5 to 6 years, a real crunch in the rental housing market that these numbers are really only starting to demonstrate. In addition to that, we've highlighted a number of groups that are vulnerable to potential housing issues. We had a 2018 homeless count conducted, lots of limitations with any homeless count, but it did identify 57 individuals who were both visible and either on the street or in shelters experiencing homelessness across the Sunshine Coast from Gibsons to Seashells. Everything we hear from stakeholder engagement shows that this number has increased. And one thing we do know about smaller and rural communities in general, and certainly our Sunshine Coast in particular, is that small communities are more likely to see hidden forms of homelessness, whether that's couch surfing or whether that's living in kind of an inadequate cabin on somebody's back lot, or maybe an inadequate mobile home or RV. Those types of housing are quite common in rural areas and in many cases more common than visible street homelessness. And the homeless count doesn't do anything to kind of catch or address those numbers because they're very difficult to be able to capture. In addition, if we look across the coast as a whole, about 560 households across the whole Sunshine Coast that were receiving some form of housing support, whether it be a subsidy or a unit from BC Housing, and the large majority were seniors, pointing again to our kind of demographic on the coast as a whole. And then finally, in terms of vulnerable groups in the town of Gibsons itself, what we heard from stakeholders was that they're increasingly unable to access housing. And this includes individuals with mental health needs, individuals with physical disabilities or developmental disabilities. Service providers did note the needs of youth. We have no youth safe house on the Sunshine Coast that provides emergency services or housing to youth. People with addictions were noted, people with mental health or physical issues, and then low-income families and seniors, low-income seniors in particular, were identified as groups that are accessing services at higher rates or even accessing the shelters and emergency housing supports. So to kind of summarize some key themes, we know that affordability is and remains a significant issue. It has become more pressing over the last 10 years, but we've known since the first housing needs assessment was done on the Sunshine Coast in 2006, and we've just seen an upward trend since there. There is a suggestion that there's a high demand for rental housing in the community, given the low availability of purpose-built rental stock, particularly in Gibsons, and the low vacancy rates that we're hearing about. There are limited housing options right now for those with physical activity limitations, and that's going to become more of a challenge as our population continues to age, as will the need for more affordable, smaller units in accessible and either ground-oriented or elevator access housing forms. And then I think, although, our community and much like right across the coast, we have a lot of single family dwellings. Those don't necessarily meet the affordability needs of lower income family households. And so options that increase, whether it's increasing the opportunities for family oriented rental housing for that group or affordable ownership options. And at the same time, homelessness and hidden homelessness are becoming more of a challenge. That said, we also know that there is a new resource coming online in Gibsons later this year, which will provide 40 supportive housing units for individuals experiencing or vulnerable to homelessness, which should make a big dent in the kinds of numbers that we're seeing, at least through methods like the homeless count. So I think I went a little over 10 minutes. Apologies for that. A lot of information to try to pack into a short presentation. So I will stop there for questions.
Great, thank you, Matt. Can we maybe get our screen back so we can see all?
Oh yeah, sorry.
Thanks. I'm still just, oh, there we go. Great, thank you. Okay, do folks have questions for Matt? It's an excellent report, lots of detail. All right, Councillor DeAndrade.
Thank you. Yes, it was an excellent report. I really enjoy reading, and the displays, the visuals are really good. Excellent. I have just a clarification. I just want to make sure that I'm interpreting correctly. On the key findings for Town of Gibsons, the third page, when you talk about the estimated number of units needed by type, and then you have currently and anticipated. And you explained that the currently it's up to 2016, but I just want to make sure that we are talking about right up to 2005, we are adding those numbers.
Sorry, I don't actually have the report open to me. Sorry, can you repeat the last part of your question? Thanks.
It's the Town of Gibsons, the summary on the third page, the part 2 key findings. And you talk about the estimated number of units needed by type.
Yep.
Let me see what page it is.
No, that's okay. I can pull open the report here. Sorry for the delay.
I think it's the very end. Sorry, I should have.
Okay. And it's on page
419 of the agenda. So.
Okay. Yeah, I've got the report open.
It's the very end.
At the very, okay.
What page is this on in the report?
On our report is 419.
No, but what is it in the report?
On the page number.
They don't have, it's 3, but it's a little summary, right? So it doesn't say too much. It's the very end. You have you provide a housing needs summary form for each one.
Oh, the summary form. Sorry. Yes.
Okay.
Apologies. Yeah, that's one of the appendices. I'll just have to find the Gibsons one if you just give me a moment. So those are, I mean, there's a limitation in sort of the usefulness of the summary forms, I will note, for the town. Page 3. Okay, I've got it. Estimated number of units needed by type of bedroom. So that is 5 years out. So that's based on the anticipated growth between 20 and 2025. So with, we have the 2016 figure from Statistics Canada, and then we have the new building permits that add to that up to 2019. So then we take our growth projections based on historical trends and estimate the number of new households that will form in that period of time. So currently represents the 2016 to 2020 period, and then anticipated represents the 2020 to 2025.
But
that's the next 5 years.
Is the total, do we add both numbers for the total?
Yeah, in theory, although it's hard to pin it down, the currently should represent all the way up to the current present day. And then if we want to look out to the next 5 years, so really the current should reflect existing growth, and there may be discrepancies. The town may have grown more since then, but we only, the projections can only kind of be based on the Statistics Canada historical population trends. So it's not always possible to kind of capture small peaks in growth that you may experience over a couple of years.
Okay, but if I just want to understand. So is it just like from 2020 to 2025, just about 10%, or we are adding both numbers and the total will be 375, for example?
So that would be the estimated household growth from 2016 to 2025 would be the combination of those two numbers.
Okay, yeah, that's what okay, thank you.
Matt, can I just ask a question, generally speaking? Is there an ideal percentage of housing types for a community? Like, what percentage of a community should be purpose-built rentals, for example?
I mean, that varies so much by the community size. You have, you move from major metropolitan areas like the city of Vancouver, city of Victoria, where I think city of Victoria currently sits at 60% of households are renter households right now, and 40% are owner households, and that's going to be quite different in our community. I mean, I think the balance is determined by looking at core housing need, and so if you have a high proportion of your renters are in core housing need, then you probably need more market rentals and non-market rentals. And if you've got a low proportion in core housing need, then you're probably doing quite well, and it would sort of indicate that there's not a lot of demand for additional rental housing. So I think in the case of our community, you know, when we have I believe it's roughly a little over 300 renter households, and 31% of them are in core housing need. That means that, you know, there's I forget the exact numbers here, but well over 100 households who are really needing an option that's outside of what they have. What we don't necessarily get by that number, but which we might get through some of the other housing indicators, is where else renters might be experiencing the crunch. I mean, I think generally speaking, though, a trend towards more renters in our community as it does densify would make sense, but it's not, you know, if you were to build, for example, 300 new units of rental over the next 3 years, that would probably clear your demand for at least the next 10 years, if not more, in terms of the growth of that population. So I think what's more important to understand is that when we look at our rental stock, there are functionally two parts of it. There's the purpose-built rental, and there's the secondary rental market. And purpose-built rental are what we often see in Vancouver in terms of the 3-story walk-ups. A lot of them were built under federal programs in the 70s, 80s, and early 90s. And we saw a big decline of them in kind of the early to mid 90s, to the point where very little was being built in terms of new rental in small and large communities. And we certainly have a few legacy buildings in Gibsons and on the Sunshine Coast that date from that era. But with a withdrawal or retraction of the federal government from housing in the kind of early to mid 90s, local government stepped in and provided alternatives to the rental market through things like secondary suites, and the allowance of that to kind of fill that gap and to provide the development of new rentals. But those tend to be a lot less secure for renters because they may be, folks can get rent evicted a little bit easier. Somebody may choose to expand into a secondary suite to expand the footprint of their own living space. They increasingly, things like Airbnb can impact that market, short-term vacation rentals can impact that market. And so what we see and what we've heard about the secondary market is that it's a lot less secure for a lot of renters, particularly the lower income renters. If you're a higher income renter, then renting out a home, you might have more options. You might look at buying if you are evicted or if you face other pressures in the housing market. So it's about kind of understanding that where we may need to put some emphasis in the next few years is the development of purpose-built rental buildings within the town and across the coast to kind of provide some security of tenure to renters. And also that housing stock is going to be purpose-built rental over the long term, looking 40, 50 years out. And if it's well built, 60 years out even. And so the market rental of today, they say, becomes the affordable rental of tomorrow.
Okay, thank you for that. Mayor Beamish.
Matt, did you look at all in concert with the planner at what is currently on our books for development and approved for development or proposed for development to see how that meets the future needs?
Yeah, we did. I mean, in particular with the non-market component, because there are a number of projects on the books. The supportive housing I've mentioned, the proposed affordable housing. Sorry, I have a little person knocking at my window trying to get my attention. It's a bit distracting. So we looked at those components, and we looked at, I think as I mentioned, we looked at building permits up to kind of 2019. But in terms of projected or slated growth in the market area, that's not one of the things that we looked at in depth. And I would hand it back over to the Director of Planning to kind of consider how that may impact growth. I will stress, though, that the projections that are in the report are likely quite conservative due to the kind of migration patterns that we're seeing around the province away from urban centers, further exacerbated, at least anecdotally, by COVID. As folks are looking for smaller communities and finding more ability to work remotely. And so I think, what you're seeing in terms of the projections are probably quite conservative in their estimate out to 2025, which is why we didn't want to take them any further than that, is because then they start to be even less reliable. So.
Director Planning, could you contribute to that?
I don't have a lot to contribute to that. I mean, we did share the building permit data and all the stats with Urban Matters so that they could crunch the numbers and come up with their projections. We've recently just crunched some numbers about what's expected in the town, not necessarily approved through building permits or development permits, but under zoning and under subdivision. We're looking at a very, very rough calculation of about 900 units. So that's sort of the best we can come
If
up
the
with.
town were to be built out to 100% of what it could be.
No, that would be, we looked back at development applications received since 2018. So that would include some of the big development projects like Gospel Rock, Eagle View, the George, even Parkland Phase 4. Those are the numbers that we crunched, and that's what we came up with.
Right, so they're not rentals per se as much as they are condos.
No, not rentals.
I know there's the development that I think the Burtnicks were developing over by the on Venture Way, which is that
was included, yeah.
And they have said that that's purpose-built rental is what their plan is there. So there's anyway, Kirsten.
Sorry, I fed Leslie Anna a bad number there. 900 was actually an estimate of the number of people housed in those units, expected occupancy for those units. It's more like 500 new units, including market and non-rental.
Okay, Councillor Lumley.
Yeah, thanks for the report, Matt. I'm sure, like, from doing this work, like before, and many times doing different parts of this work, I mean, you could probably see some of these numbers before you even collected them. But is there anything that stood out with you? Like, did you learn anything? Like, even though you say anybody can anticipate, you know, the real estate market shooting up and all the effects that would have on rentals and people that can't afford to buy, is there anything that really kind of surprised you or you learned from putting this report together that maybe you hadn't anticipated before?
Not necessarily that I haven't anticipated, but I think what the report reflects is really that the stakeholders that we engaged with have a really strong grasp over what's going on in the community. And I do want to emphasize that it was a huge diversity. We had a steering committee that consisted of nonprofits, Scredo, Community Futures, Vancouver Coastal Health, as well as staff from local governments and a number of others. So I think, you know, the trends that they've been seeing and reporting on anecdotally over the last number of years are very much reflected in what we're seeing in the report. And I think, you know, maybe not so much a surprise, but more a statement of change that our community, which I think we value for its small character and you know what it has to offer, is at the same time, you know, we're very close to a major metropolitan center. And so because of what's happening in that center with the cost of housing and ongoing growth, we're certainly feeling the ripples of it in this community. And I don't think we're alone. You know, communities on Vancouver Island and communities in the interior are experiencing the same thing. But it does, I think it speaks to a need for kind of the managed and thoughtful growth approach. Or I think our OCP does a really good job of you know, kind of approaching things from a smart growth perspective. But continuing along that trend, like we're not going to see a decline, and if anything, I would imagine we're going to see an increase in new residents coming from major urban areas, precisely because of the kind of lifestyle and community that we all love here on the coast, and that's gonna drive some conversations about how we manage that growth, I think.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Matt. Unless I see any other comments from the gallery, we have a number of recommendations that have been put forward to us, and I'd like to try to just read them all out and see if we can move all of them all at once. We've got a recommendation that the Sunshine Coast Housing Needs Assessment Report be endorsed, and that staff report back to the policy options. That staff report back with policy options based on the results of the Sunshine Coast Housing Needs Assessment Report that addresses future housing needs, and further that these recommendations be forwarded to tonight's council meeting. Would someone like to move those 3 recommendations? Councillor Crowell, seconded by Councillor Lumley. All in favor? Excellent. Okay, well, thank you very much, Matt. It's an excellent report, as previously said, and we really appreciate your time on that.
Thank you very much.
Okay. The next item on our agenda is inquiries. Corporate Officer, are there any?
Hi, sorry, I'm a bit backlit. The sun's behind me. At this time, I'll ask anybody who's in the meeting as an attendee, if you have an inquiry of council, to please use the raise the hand feature found at the bottom of the screen, and I'll turn on your audio and video. And I'm not seeing any, Chair Ladwig.
All right, thank you, Corporate Officer. Okay, so I think that concludes our meeting. The next Planning and Development Committee meeting is to be held on November 3rd here in our Zoom council chambers. So with that, can I get a motion to adjourn the meeting, please? Councillor Crowell, Mayor Beamish, all in favor? Okay, thanks everyone. Thanks, Cliff. Thanks, Scott. See you next time.
There you go.
Bye, everyone. See you soon.
Okay, bye.